There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Shawn, the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am with my dear friend Lindy from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and we are going to talk about books, especially what she's been reading and what she would recommend and what she has recommended. You can follow me on my Friday reads for what's going on in my reading life, but let's probe the reading life of Lindy. Hello, Lindy.
Hello there.
Hello. So, been reading much these days?
Well, I have been listening to a lot of audiobooks,
Okay.
and I've been reading a lot of graphic novels.
Okay.
These are two formats that I've always enjoyed,
Right.
but I find that my reading life has really shifted to these two formats and not a lot in print. And I've been thinking about why that is. And with books, I'm looking to experience other people's lives. What are people like? Ugh, I'm all tongue-tied about this. So I like reading about other people's lives, but I also like the intellectual stimulation and the pure joy of language. So I'm looking for books that are written in a style that really gives me a thrill.
Right.
And I was feeling pretty anxious and discovered that I couldn't focus on books. But
and when you say books, just to make sure that it's clear, you mean like textual?
Yes.
Right.
Exactly. Print. Whereas with audiobooks, that extra element, engaging another sense, was helping me to immerse myself in that story that's told that way.
Yes.
And also, I think with graphic novels, because there's the visual element, I was able to focus in. And with audiobooks and graphic novels, I'm less concerned with beautiful language and with the intellectual stimulation. So I'm getting more accustomed to being in isolation, and so I'm finding it easier to read print now.
Okay.
Graduating on, but I'm finding that no matter what it is, it's always through this filter of what's going on around me right now. I was reading The Mirror and the Light by Kettle, and there's some aspect where war is going on, and so large gatherings are banned in London.
Okay.
So of course, I'm thinking of the COVID-19 banning gatherings. Yeah, it's just that sort of thing where it just keeps popping up everywhere.
It's not so much in my reading as when I see some kind of a video, like of a clip from a movie or TV show, or watching something on Netflix, and I kind of cringe. You shouldn't be standing so close together.
Yeah, I know.
And
I've been really attracted to the elements in story that have to do with living with uncertainty.
Yes.
So, for example, I listened to the audiobook of Jin Patrol on the Purple Line.
Okay, I've heard of it, just the title. I know the title.
Deepa Anapara is the author. And it's a novel. It's set in a slum, and children are disappearing. And this is based on real life. There are hundreds of children that go missing all the time there for all kinds of terrible reasons.
Right.
But the focus is on their families and how they live their lives through all this. And I found I really appreciated seeing how these people are coping.
Right.
I read some short stories that were set in Japan after the atomic bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Was that from this big anthology?
Yes, from the Penguin Book of Japanese Short Stories. Great. Yeah. And those really affected me as well. Maybe stories about people dealing with disaster made me feel like part of a continuum, and we can get through it. And there's worse things that have happened. I'm lucky in my house with food and everything else.
So you're not an escapist type of reader, are you?
Not at all.
No, I'm not. I can't relate to that kind of reading, never have. But I'm not seeking out stories that kind of resonate. But just like what you said, everything is kind of resonating because we have this filter. And we're just kind of experiencing stories anew through this new reality, however temporary or permanent it is.
Yeah.
The one that you just mentioned, the Jin something, have you
Jin
finished it?
Purple Line. Yes, I finished.
And
Yeah.
you liked it. You would recommend it.
Yes, I would recommend it. Possibly not a Shawn book.
Okay.
It does. It has very slight mystical elements.
Okay.
That can also be explained away as these people believe it, but you don't,
right.
As a reader, you don't have to.
Right. Okay, that doesn't put me off. Especially if it's from a different religion than Christianity, I'm usually more likely to be okay with it. So.
Right.
Great.
I've got a graphic novel from France called Légèreté, which in English that would be Levity.
Levity. And you're reading it in French, I'm sure?
Yeah, I am. It's by Catherine Meurice, and it's about the bombing of, the Charlie Hebdo.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
This cartoonist who did the book worked there.
Okay.
And so it's pretty heavy, the subject, but I'm quite liking it. She's got a really loose, cartoony style that kind of reminds me of the comics that are often in the New Yorker.
Okay.
Very loosely sketched and kind of caricatures. Yeah.
Do you know if it's been translated?
I don't know.
After we recorded this, Lindy found out that yes, in fact, it has been translated into English, and the English title is Lightness. Here is the cover image, and the bibliographic detail, as always, is in the show notes.
Okay, we'll check. Yeah, we'll check. That's great.
Yeah. It was part of a stack of books that I had checked out from the library the day before the library closed.
No.
So it's just kind of a potpourri of, that I'm kind of stretching out. Fortunately, many of them are graphic novels.
And you said it was a stack.
A stack, yeah.
How many in that stack?
Oh, maybe 12. There's a collection of short stories that I haven't started yet. But there's one cookbook. I usually have one cookbook out from the library at a time, and I like to just read cookbooks, and sometimes I'll, do a few recipes from it. Unfortunately, this is one that I'm not too interested in cooking from, and I'm really disappointed.
Why?
It's called Nothing Fancy. It's by Alison Roman.
And you're so fancy, aren't you?
Well, the thing is, these recipes are fancy, and she says, oh, you just want to be yourself and relax and don't go to a lot of trouble. But some of these recipes really are a lot of trouble. And they're also a lot of meat, and I'm a vegetarian. I think her favorite thing is anchovies. There's anchovies in everything.
I don't think I've ever had an anchovy.
One thing that I'm looking forward to getting to is a book that I've had on my shelf for quite a while. It's from New Zealand. I don't know if you can.
I can. Decline and Fall on Salmon Street by Fiona Farrell. I don't know this book or writer at all.
I've read some of her other books before. Mr. Albone's Ferrets is wonderful. Book. And
Book.
The Hopeful Traveler. Yeah, I really like her style. And I know this one is about living in Christchurch. I've glanced through it. The first chapter is set in 1906, and then each chapter after that jumps 2 years ahead, all the way to 2012.
Okay, wow.
Just that format reminds me of the Jane Smiley trilogy that started with Some Luck.
Okay, no, I don't know her work.
Every chapter jumps a year ahead and it follows this family. I like the idea of that.
That sounds
And,
intriguing.
and the only other novel that I've read that deals with the earthquakes in Christchurch is one by Kate DeGoldie. It's called From the Cutting Room of Barney Kettle.
Okay. I have never heard of those people. That's great. Let me interject. I want you to continue with what you're reading, but I also want to talk a little bit about this. Was a gift from Lindy, The Student by Carrie Fagan, a Canadian writer, and it's a novella, about 150 pages. And you sent this to me maybe November. Yeah, your little note here is November 20th, 2019. And I picked it up the other day and read the first 15 pages, and it was love at first sight. I'm really, really enjoying it. So you said that you were so confident that it was a Shawn book. Can you tell my subscribers why you thought so? Because you were right.
I just had the feel as I was reading it. Oh, I think Shawn would like this. I think Shawn would like this. Later, when you said it reminded you of Barbara Pym, I think, it was that kind of texture that I was picking up.
I don't want to go too far with that analogy, but yes, there's something about the protagonist that reminds me of a Pym protagonist, and I love her already. So, thank you. And you said you didn't remember the artwork you included. Will you be too shy for me to show it?
No, I want to see it because I can't remember.
So this was the card that Lindy. So with a note on the back. So what can you tell us about this now that you're seeing it?
Okay, so I'm working on a quilt where each piece of the quilt has got a handmade print on it. And so I carved this to go on the quilt. So there's block printing, there's monoprint, there's cyanotype printing, so different techniques of printing on fabric. And my theme for the quilt is spruce trees and spruce trees in my garden. I have a large garden in the city and it's full of trees and I love spruce trees. So it's a work of art that I'm in the process of putting together.
Fabulous. Well, this is gorgeous. It's too precious to use as a bookmark, but I'm keeping it in the book forever. But I'm not using it as a bookmark because I don't want it to get all bent on the top. So thank you. Maybe by the time this video goes live on my channel, I will have finished this. But yeah, I wanted to thank you publicly for this because it's sure starting out good.
And Shawn, have you started reading Mira Jacob, Good Talk?
No, I haven't, but I know that you told me that would be a good time, so it's sitting here, and I do hope to get to it. I loved her story in the New York Times. It was so powerful last week. And why do you think I should read this now?
It's got current events. It's got really good characterization. You've asked me to recommend graphic novels that you think that you would like.
Yeah.
I think that you would like the style of this. I think it'll work for you.
Yeah. Based on how much I love the short story, graphic story that she had in the New York Times about the COVID-19, the beginning of the epidemic in the States, I think so too. And you're not the only one who has been putting this in front of me and saying, Shawn, this is a Shawn book, read it. So what else have you got on the go or coming up next?
Coming up, I've got Duck's Newburyport.
Oh, wow.
So this was in the stack that I brought home from the library back on March 12th, I think. And then the library's closed on the 13th. And I started reading, and I was excited. This 1,000 pages. Oh, this is going to last me. This is great. Because normally I go through a book a day, although not 1,000 pages. I read about 23 pages and oh no. You're inside this woman's mind and she's just all over the place, scattered, she's agitated. It was definitely not the right time for me to read it. However, I'm feeling a lot better now And Jenny of Reading Envy
Mm-hmm.
is along on the 19th
Of
of,
that's Newburyport.
of Ducks Newburyport.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
So I thought, all right, I am going to start again and see how it goes. So that's
Yeah.
on the
I
horizon for me.
I
And
can't remember how many pages I got. Maybe 100 pages in, and I abandoned it. It was just the fact that and all the repetitive stuff. It just didn't. It started to really bug me. I had enjoyed the first 50 pages, and I think I stopped enjoying it after that and stopped at page 100. I might get it as a book to judge for the BookTube Prize. I'm doing the semifinals again in June, and if I get it, I will have to read it. So otherwise, I think I'm good. Thanks.
right. I'm talking to you using my phone. And so I've, propped it up on a stack of books,
Of
including
course you have.
Ducks Newburyport and a Webster's Dictionary, but also I've got Rohinton Mysteries, A Fine Balance.
Oh,
And I'm getting close to getting ready to tackle that one.
oh, you haven't read it.
I haven't read it yet. I've had it on my shelf for years.
It's so good. I'm sure you're going to love it. I mean, I'll be shocked if you don't, but yeah.
Yeah, I think I will like it.
There's
Recently on
nothing escapist about that novel, that's for sure. Oh, it's rich
Yeah.
and
So recently on Twitter, Eric Collar Anderson was saying, what's the most
depressing book.
depressing book you've read or something like that. And so many people mentioned A Fine Balance and also mentioned how good it was.
Yeah.
Well, I like dark.
Absolutely fantastic. Yeah, that was an interesting thread. I have to go back and see what all the other answers were. What did I put? Do you remember? It's a Korean American novel, and I had to hunt for the title because I couldn't remember it. So see if I can quickly find that, because I wonder if you have read it. Since the pandemic overwhelmed all of our lives, have you been on Twitter much?
I have been, yes.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time. Actually, you know what? Here's something personal. Today's the first morning where I slept through the night until 6 a.m. I've usually been waking up at around 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. and I'm up for 2 hours, like I'm awake, not up, but awake for 2 hours reading the news, and then finally go back to sleep. But I slept through till 6 a.m. So that's a good sign, I think.
Yeah. I found that I was addicted to refreshing the news, and it was just doing my head in. And I wake up in the night a lot too. And the first thing I want to do is reach for Twitter, and
Yeah.
I stop myself. And if I really have to, I'll look at Litzy. More positive. It's just about books, and then I can go back to sleep. But it's more likely that I will just switch to listening to a podcast that I know will make me go back to sleep, like something about cooking or Guardian books, because their nice British voices make me sleep.
Right. Right. I post so much, retweet so much. Oh, you know what I can do? I think I saved the picture, so that's how I'll find it a lot quicker. Yeah, there it is. The one that I put on Eric's feed was Shelter by Dung.
I haven't read that.
It is so dark and depressing, and what salvaged it for me and made it a really memorable read, like and positive, I think I gave it 4 stars, was that there was just the faintest glimmer of hope at the end. I still almost wanted to kill myself, but there was just the faintest glimmer, and that was just that touch at the end. Like really, I think it all came down to what was said by the main character in the last line of the novel. That it was like, okay, I can hang on to that. It was really, but what a dark family story. Oh, it opens with, in the first chapter, the Korean American young man, his young wife, they notice an older naked woman running across the park towards their house, and they're really like, what the hell's going on? And then the closer she comes, the man realizes it's his mother. And that's how the story opens. And it goes from there. Oh my God, what an incredible novel. So.
Oh, The one that I said was really depressing was one that's practically nihilistic. And I would only recommend it to people who are looking for the gut feel of what it would be like to be living near the US Mexican border in Mexico with drug cartels and never knowing if you're going to get shot and killed. And oh,
And what is that?
it's called Saint Death, and it's by Marcus Sedgwick. Oh, bleak, 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 bleak.
All right. Have we completely depleted the roster of bookish things to talk about? I doubt it, but maybe
I doubt, but we could save it for another time.
we should save it for another time. You should go back to your gin. And you said you've got dinner on the stove. What's cooking?
I've got some Louisiana red beans and rice.
Oh.
So they've been simmering for hours, and they're nice and spicy and smoky and
I can almost smell them. So if you're game, send me either a picture or a 20-second, 10-second video of your beans.
All right.
That will end it on a positive aromatic note.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Lindy.
Thank you, Shawn. It's great talking to you.
Take care.